So if you could help them to keep your camera off and your mute on, that would hopefully make this a bit more administratively easy. It's really a pleasure to have you all on the line today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope to make it valuable for you. And again, if you could just try and keep your cameras and your mics off. Using the message box, you're very welcome to engage with us and to engage with each other. And we will do the best that we can to respond during the session. And if we don't get a chance to respond during the session, certainly we'll get back to you afterward. So as an intro, you're probably wondering, how come an ethical perspective on client reviews? And as it happens, we deal with many of you on a regular basis. So we know that reviews are a really topical conversation in practices, and for a couple of reasons. We know that we're trying to do the right thing in a client review. We know that it's an opportunity to show value. And most importantly, I think we realize that it's an opportunity to be intentional in our relationships with clients. So we know that reviews are a really topical thing. That's also then coupled with the FBI CPD cycle coming to an end, so at the end of May, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people out there that are very much like me, and we're scrambling to get the last of our CPD points together. So we thought we'd bring these two things together, we'd combine them into a single CPD session for you, help you to get especially the ethics CPD point. So we know that the ethics CPD is a little bit like hen's teeth. And we hope that we can help you to be more intentional about the value that you add to your clients. So from an administrative position, so with respect to the CPD points and the certificate, at the end of this, we're going to ask you to run through a very quick, a really fun, short assessment. The assessment will have your email address on, and if you run through those 5 very amusing questions, we'll print a certificate for you and we'll send it to you in the next day or 2. So at the end of the session, we'll post a link in the messages, and that'll be your path to claiming your ethics CPD. As an aside, I hope you like the picture that I've got on the screen here, and I mean it's an interesting picture, I think, for 2 reasons. So first of all, it's really hard to find a relative or a relevant picture for client reviews to stick up on the front page of a presentation. You can't just have like
Gary, you muted again, sorry.
So I don't know where I left off there. So I'll pick up with the
Start
looking.
over again.
I'll pick up
just
with
the last 30 seconds.
I'll pick up with the picture that I've got on the screen here, and why I think it's cool. Mostly because I realize that every morning I look into the mirror, it's very much like a client review. And if I think of what am I doing when I'm looking in the mirror, or what are we doing when we're looking at a client's review, it could be a little bit like this picture. Are we looking to find our old selves and all the stuff that we could have, would have, should have, maybe might have done? So an experience filled with regrets and upset. Or is it an opportunity to look at your current self and think out loud, what are the options that I've got to go forward? So it's a fun little picture. And I'm going to dive straight into into an ethical perspective on client reviews. So I'm sure that you can imagine, as soon as you bring in the word ethical, it really casts the net really, really wide, because it begs the question, you know, where does one start? And if you're anything like I am, you know, there's every inclination to go back to the ancient philosophers and hear what they had to say about ethics. On the way other end of the spectrum, I might just consult Google, or, you know, I'm ashamed to admit, I might even have a look on Wikipedia. And it suddenly struck me, there's probably a whole bunch of really sharp people that have already done this on our behalf. And I went and had a look on the FBI, through all of the FBI stuff. And indeed, I found the FBI's Code of Ethics and Practice Standards, which incorporate a whole bunch of rules and a whole bunch of professional conduct guidelines, which I was very happy to find has done a lot of the work for us. So we're going to take a look at what the Code of Ethics has to say about the review process, and we'll work through how that applies to our day-to-day stuff. So just maybe a bit of an upfront disclaimer that working through these sort of practice standards and these ethical codes can be a little bit of hard work. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me for 2 or 3 slides, and then we'll try and get into something that makes it really useful in your practices on a day-to-day basis. So I'm anticipating that there's going to be different people sort of making their way through the first 2 or 3 slides. So some people, like this dude over here, looking really interested and like hanging on each word to see what the next one will be. Perhaps some people being really passionate, like this dude in the background over here. And then maybe some that are completely disinterested, like this guy over here. But hopefully we can bring it all together and we can make it really practical, so that you can use it to show the value that you are doing in the background for your clients. So let's dive straight into it. The Code of Ethics. What is the Code of Ethics? There are 2 parts to the Code of Ethics. The first part is about the values. So the values are what are our duties that we've got to do for clients. What do we need to live up to? How do we show up to our clients? And there's a whole bundle. There's 8 principles that I'm sure you can relate to that show us how do we need to be showing up to our clients. So we need to be putting the client first. We need to be acting with integrity, with objectivity. We need to be fair, competent, confidential, act with due diligence, be professional. So, I mean, basically what they're saying is don't be this dude. And for those of you that don't know who this dude is, he is the Wolf of Wall Street. So not the Leonardo DiCaprio part of it, but the Wolf of Wall Street. So basically, don't be that guy. On the other side, we've got practice standards. Now the practice standards actually go into quite a bit of detail in each of the 6 steps of the financial planning, the advocated financial planning process. So I'm sure we're all really familiar with these 6 steps. We know we've got to establish a relationship, we've got to collect data, we've got to analyze the data, we've got to develop recommendations for the client, we've got to implement those recommendations, and then step number 6 is we've got to get back and review everything that we've done for the client. So each of these steps have very specific rules and practice standards that we need to abide by. So, I mean, as you can imagine, it's a bit of a document, and each of the steps has a couple of pages. So what we've done is we've synthesized the key themes across each of the 6 steps, so we can sort of take a step back and say, what are the themes that the practice standards and the rules are telling us? And then we'll dive specifically into step number 6 to say, okay, what is the review step telling us from an ethical point of view? So let's have a look at these themes. These are the themes that are popping out of this. So the first theme there is to understand the client. So, and interestingly, it talks about qualitatively and quantitatively, and already that's quite an interesting thing, because what do we mean when we say qualitative? What is that? Is that stories? Is that feelings? And what is quantitative? Is that an astute download? Is that calcs? So that's already interesting. The second one there is we've got to meet the needs of the client. We've got to agree on delivery. We've got to disclose all the things that we know, our conflicts, our abilities, our remuneration, competences, all of that sort of stuff. We've got to try and not misrepresent who we are. We've got to manage client expectations. We've got to find the right recommendations for these clients. And we've got to promote understanding and transparency. So, you know, if we take another step back and we have a look at these 8 themes, the sense that I get from these themes, so from these practice standards and these rules, is that we really need to be focused on the client. Yeah, so now if we I think that there's every temptation to look at these themes and to say, that's definitely what I do. And let's have a look then at the next practice standard, which is specifically practice standard number 6. So this is, we need to review the client situation. So we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into what this practice standard says. It says we need to agree the terms for reviewing and reevaluating the client's situation. So again, we've got the highlight on the client situation, and we need to agree what are we focusing on, and are we doing it monthly? Are we doing it quarterly? Are we doing it annually? We need to evaluate the client's situation against his confirmed needs. We need to gather, again, there's this quantitative and qualitative information question. And then we need to develop and present appropriate recommendations. And again, I think that there's every inclination for us to sit back and to say, I do all of that stuff. And certainly we know that advisors are adding a lot of value to their clients in a very ethical way. And I think what this gives us an opportunity to do is to look and see, can we be more intentional in the value that we show to our clients? So I think that there's a lot of words here that we could understand better to better evaluate the extent to which we are being intentional in adding value and in being ethical to clients. So words like client's situation, what does client's situation mean? Words like quantitative and qualitative, what does that mean? Words like recommendations, what do those words actually mean? And might they cast a bit of light in terms of the intentionality that we give to the reviews with our clients? So I'm going to bring that all back down to 3 basic concepts, because there were lots of words there. And if we come down to the key concepts, what the code is telling us to do is to show up honestly. It is to understand the client situation, and it is to make a plan to take them forward. So there's lots of words, and if we really bring it down to the basics, there are 3 primary things that we need to be doing. Now, obviously, these may seem like pretty glib statements, so we're going to try and unpick them and assess the opportunity to add value and and to be more ethical in each of these engagements. So I want to start off just by making it really practical. So, you know, we see many client reviews in practice, and the type of stuff that we see, I mean, to start off, a review it's a funny part of that process because it's almost a process within a process. So in the review part, you're doing a whole bunch of the stuff that's also part of the overall process. So we're understanding, we're assessing, we're doing all of that stuff at once. So if we think of an engagement, Benny, is everything still going on there? Am I talking to...
You're going perfectly, Gary.
Okay, good. I'm just checking I'm not like speaking to a blank computer. Thanks. All right, so if we think of the ordinary engagement, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening. There's chatting, there's understanding about what's happened in the client's life. There are discussions about performance. There are updates to the portfolios. There's potentially implementation of other products. There's assessment of the performance of the product. There's a check-in on the plan. So there's lots of stuff that's happening. And I suppose what we can do is we can put two lenses onto all of that stuff that's happening, and we can ask two questions. Are we covering our bases from an ethical point of view? And secondly, are we being intentional of the value that we are showing to clients? So obviously the review is an opportunity to show value, and are we being intentional about what value we are showing to our clients? So we're gonna see if we can map this out in a bit of a framework. And I think one thing to quickly have a look at is just the word review. So the word review implies by necessity that there is something to be reviewed. And so what we're saying is that review is happening in the context of an existing plan. So in that context, we know that the code is saying there is stuff that we've got to understand. So stuff we've got to understand. We know that there are two aspects to this. There are two dimensions to the stuff that we need to understand. We know there's stuff that's happening in the client's life. So clients are humans, and humans are subject to relationships and careers and health and family and dreams and hopes and disappointments and all of this stuff. So there is a minefield of stuff for us to understand in the life of the client. But that's not all, because independently of that, there is stuff that we need to understand in the life of the product. So there is delivery, there is performance, there are T's and C's, there is regulatory impact. So all of those things are happening on the side of the product or the client's portfolio. Now, all of that understanding is going to introduce two things. So either there's going to be surprise to the plan, didn't expect that, or there's going to be no surprise to the plan. Okay, so nothing surprising. And then the second part of the code says that there is then stuff that we have to do to take the clients forward. So we got to do stuff when there are surprises. So we want to take our clients forward, and we got to take them forward, you know, when there are no surprises. And we've got to take them forward in both of these dimensions, in the client's life and in the product's life. So let's map this out now. So I think you'll agree that we saw that on one side, on one axis, we've got either surprises happen or surprises do not happen. And on the other axis, we've got stuff happens in the life of the client and stuff happens in the life of the product. So now we can sit back and we can say, okay, now what do we need to understand in the life of the client? And as we said, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Clients get divorced, they get retrenched, they receive windfalls, they become sick, they get promoted. There's a whole bunch of stuff for us to understand on the side of the client's life, which introduces surprise to the financial plan that's already in place. By the same token, there is stuff that happens in the life of the product or the portfolio that introduces surprise to the existing financial plan. So there's performance, there's terms, there's service, there's delivery. All of these things, especially when they do not happen, introduce surprise to the plan. And then as a consequence of that understanding and the knowledge that there is surprise, we find that there is obviously some stuff that we need to do to take clients forward. So if we think of stuff in the life of the client, we know that in the event of a divorce or a retrenchment, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And we're going to have to figure out, are the goals still appropriate? So we may need to reassess the goals that we had, and we may need to reprioritize and restart and double check that everything there is appropriate. And then once we've got the goals fixed, we probably have to create new planning strategies to help achieve this new position that we're in. So if a client has a health issue, it may very well be that his investment strategy changes. So in other words, he may need a different time period. He may have different liquidity needs. He may require a more aggressive or a more conservative investment strategy. So there seems like a few obvious things to be doing in that case. In the event of stuff being surprising on the product side, so if we have a walkout of an asset management team, that's going to be a bit of a surprise, and we're going to sit back and the advisor is going to say, right, there's stuff we need to do. Let's fire these asset managers. Let's appoint new managers. Let's implement new products. Let's replace products. So I think it's quite intuitive that in the event of there being surprises to the plan, there are things that the advisor needs to be doing. So that's fairly intuitive, and it feels like we're quite good at being intentional about the value that we're adding in the event of there being surprises to the financial plan. On the other side of our little picture here, it's a little bit less obvious. So how do we be intentional about the value that we're adding where there are no surprises in the life of the client? And of course, we know that advice isn't limited to occasions in which there is change and surprise. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we do that adds value to clients when there are no surprises. So, but we know we're not going to be reprioritizing goals. The goals haven't changed. Nothing has shifted there. We know we don't need to rework the planning strategies. There are no surprises. So all of those cash flows, everything that we've done in the event of there not being any surprises remain. So they're all for the long term, so they got to be holding tight. So this is the situation when the plan that we've already put in remains appropriate. So how then do we be intentional about showing value in progressive ways for our clients? So I mean, it's basically right. The plan that's in place is appropriate. That's great. What do we do now? How do we make it awesome? So let's have a look at the other side. So the other side of the stuff that we can do to add value where there are no surprises, either in the life of the client or in the life of the product or the portfolio. Is there stuff? There is stuff, and we know we're doing this. So this is the sort of circumstance that we can take the next steps to implement the plan that we've agreed. So we know that there is opportunity to allocate more savings to a goal. We know that there's opportunity to pay off debt. Let's get rid of it. We know that there are mechanisms to keep clients motivated. So let's work on those, and let's be intentional to show that to our clients. We can sense check the existing plan for rigor. So we can look at the plan with different lenses on. So we can look at the plan and say, in the event of a liquidity occurrence, what would you do, Mr. Client? And so this is another mechanism for the client to take ownership and to really demonstrate to the advisor that they know what to do in the event of a liquidity situation. And similarly, in the event of somebody dying, or of somebody becoming ill, or of somebody becoming disabled, or that legacy that they want to leave for their kids. And this is really the space where the coaching fits in, where the motivating fits in, and the education fits in. So, you know, there are no surprises. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about the behavior gap. You know, why is it that clients do not achieve the growth that the market delivers? So this is now an opportunity to show that value, which is something other than redoing the plan that we've already put in place. And the same thing for the product. On the product and on the portfolio side, there's a whole lot that we can be doing and do to administrate, to update, and to elevate the client's situation. So we can look at the existing plan and say, what are the opportunities here for lowering costs for this client? How can I improve access to this client, or enhance transparency, or take a tax perspective and improve tax consequences? So again, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could be doing in the event of there being no surprises, either in the life of the client or the product. So I'm coming back to these three themes that are in the FPI code of ethics. So we've got to show up honestly, we've got to understand the client's situation, and we've got to make a plan to take them forward. So if we keep those things in mind, it seems to be that two review strategies emerge. So the first one is when things do not go as planned, you know, and there are surprises that are introduced into the client's financial plan. Now, this is, we've got to go back to the drawing board. We've got to reevaluate, we've got to re-strategize, we've got to do all of that stuff again. And really what we're doing in these reviews is we're doing revision planning. And then there's stuff when things go according to plan. And I think that we find this over a long-term relationship with a client. There are very often, you know, long periods of time where there is no surprise in the life of the client. Things just go according to plan. But there is opportunity for us to be intentional about the value that we add, and we can implement, we can improve, and we can motivate. And we can think of this as proactive planning with the client. Yeah, so overall, each planning strategy, so each revision or each review strategy reminds us that there is opportunity to be intentional about the different value that we can add over different points in a client's life, which all clients over time will experience. So again, I hope I haven't been just talking to a blank screen. Is everybody there?
Yeah, we're all
Right.
there. Okay.
So let me. Hey, Francis. Okay, so we're gonna try and make this even more practical now. So Kirsty is gonna take us through two really practical examples of an advisor doing revision revision review or a proactive review. Thanks, Kirst.
All right, just let me know if you can see my screen, Gary.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. It's great to see all of you, or almost see all of you here today. I wanted to start, those of you who know Gary know that his thinking and thoughts and ideas always seem to fit very neatly into a Venn diagram or a 2x2. But today, what I want to do is work through practical examples in each of these quadrants. And it's not to show you something new necessarily or something technical that you don't know, but more, I know that all of you are doing these things and adding this value to clients. But the question I want to answer today is, how do we bring it in to that client engagement? How do we bring it into the meeting where the client can understand, they can feel the value that they're adding and engage with that. And to do that, I'm going to work through some examples in Asset Map. And the first one I'm going to look at is on this left-hand side of the square. So it's revision planning. This is where something has changed in the client's life or something has changed in the product life. And it means that we need to re-look at the planning. So we need to review it. So I'm going to pop into Asset Map quickly. Gary, you can still see, right? Just double checking. Okay.
All good.
So let me introduce you to this family. We have Jack and Jessica Jones, and we have their two kids, Jane and Jack Jr. And I'm just going to talk through a little bit about their current picture, and then I'll talk through the change. So on this side, we can see that Jack earns an income. We can see that he's got a retirement fund in place with his employer, and that's linked to some group life cover that's linked to that retirement fund. In our planning previously, we realized it wasn't quite enough should something happen to Jack, so we topped up that life cover over here. He's also got a couple of discretionary investments as well as an endowment. On Jessica's side, she's got a retirement annuity fund and she's got life cover in place. Together they have a home and a bond. So now to think about the change that's happened. So I wanted to use an example where someone in the family has passed away. And I'm not at all suggesting this is the first conversation you would have with the client or, that there won't be subsequent conversations. But I feel like at this point for Jessica, so we're going to assume Jack is now passed away. And for Jessica, what she needs is assurance. She needs to understand that while she's in this, time of grieving, that the plans are in place, that she's okay, and that she'll be able to sustain, the income that she needs. But she also needs to understand really practically, what does this mean? What are the funds, what are the assets that are there? What is the life cover that's available? When will she receive it? How will she receive it? And I want to use Asset Map just to illustrate how you would show that to a client. Again, it's about bringing this conversation into the meeting. So Jessica, we know that, with Jack's passing, this salary will now fall away. But we do have this retirement fund in place, and this is linked to this group benefit life cover. And what that means is that life cover is a benefit that Jack had through the retirement fund. Now, how that works in practice is the retirement fund has trustees, and those trustees have responsibility to ensure that these funds, both the retirement fund and the life cover benefit linked to it, are used for Jack's dependents. And that process of understanding the dependents, understanding their needs, and ensuring that the money is used appropriately for that can take up to 12 months. But what we also put in place was this additional life cover, and that will go straight into your bank account. On this side, Jack also had these discretionary investments in place, and those will flow into what we call an estate account. And the purpose, when we did the plan with you and Jack previously, we said the purpose of these funds would be to cover any costs that relate to potentially Jack's passing. So we know that there's going to be some taxes, some costs involved, and those funds we've earmarked to cover that. Whatever is left over from that will come to you. Jack also had an endowment in place, and with that, he could nominate certain beneficiaries. And as part of our previous planning, he said that he would like 1.4 million to go to you and the other million to be split between your two children to give them 500,000 Rand each to cover education. Now, not to worry, we'll go through all of that together and work out what sort of strategy we need to put in place for that. But today, I want to give you just a little bit of understanding and peace of mind of what the next steps are. If we have a look at what your picture will look like, during this transfer process, your life cover that you have stays intact over here, and your retirement fund remains. This retirement fund of Jack's, along with this group cover over here, both of those are going to flow into a fund where we're awaiting the trustees. So that's the one that could take up to 12 months. These unit trusts over here, they're going to go into a cash in the estates to cover any costs that need to be covered, during this process. But this life cover will flow straight into your bank account, and we're going to use those funds to, settle this bond and to ensure that you can receive the income that you need over this time period while we wait on the trustees to wind this up. We will do all of this with you, all of the paperwork, working with the trustees, and get it to a point where you can know that the money you need will come in each month. Also, from the home point of view, it was jointly owned. That will now also be transferred into your name, and the endowment, the 1.4 million, will come to you. So all I'm doing in this picture and through these drawings is just giving Jessica the comfort of knowing what is going to happen next. How is this going to flow? Am I going to be okay? Is the plans in place that we put in place still in place? I know that there's still going to be more conversations around, what sort of income does she need? How do we ensure that the strategies are right for that? But by bringing this conversation into the engagement with the client, I can really show her to a point that she can understand, engage, and feel that comfort of knowing we know what's happening next. So that's an example of, this revision planning. But what happens on this other side when there's no surprises? And I think this can be sometimes a little bit, trickier because the plan is in place, it's working, the strategy is in place, and that's doing what it needs to do, and the client is on track. But what I see in this side of planning is that financial planners do a lot of reviewing in the background. For example, looking at the plan from a legal point of view, from a structure point of view, from a tax point of view, from an investment point of view, and even from a risk point of view. But again, the question is, how do we bring that into the engagement with the client so they can also see that value and see that we're reviewing these different aspects all the time? So I'm going to go through two examples in this scenario. I'm going to introduce you to another family. In this case, we have Joe and Katie. And Joe and Katie have two kids, Jane and Jason. And Joe also has his own business, the Smith Company. And to start off with, I'll work through with Joe and Katie just where we are, just a reminder of what their picture looks like, what they do have in place, what plans we've put together already. So Joe, we know you received this income from the Smith family. We also know you've got this retirement fund, and we've looked at that and looked at what you needed to contribute to make sure that that can be enough for what your needs are in retirement. We've started this emergency fund. You have these shares in place. Because you own the business, that sits as an asset in your name, and that's the ownership of that business. And then you've got this loan account. Now, I know, Joe, we've spoken about this loan account before. So this is money that you owe to the business. So it's a liability for you. And in our previous conversations, you mentioned that, the idea with that is to pay it off over time. I want to spend a little bit more time today just talking about that and the impact of that business loan. But let's go over to your side, Katie. We've got your income and your retirement fund in place. You've also started, working towards an emergency fund here. And then you've got these unit trusts that you inherited from your late father. And I know at the time of inheritance, you were grieving, and the key thing we wanted to do is just move it into your name. And we said that down the line we would talk more about that. And I want to talk a little bit more about these funds and the purpose of those funds in our session today. From a risk planning point of view, we know your will is in place and up to date, and we've put in enough, cover should anything unforeseen happen to you, Joe, or to you, Katie. We know that we've got plans in place for that. Let's take a look at the kids quickly. So if we look at Jane and Jason, we know we've started these tax-free savings for them a couple of years ago. That's still going, and we'll still keep contributing to that. So if we take a look at you and the business for a second, the thing I want to clarify here is we know that the business owns this building. So it's not in your name, it's in the name of the business. And I want to talk more about this loan account. So you can see here it's an asset in the business, but on your side, it's a liability. And as we mentioned before, I know the thinking is to pay that off over time. But you mentioned that now because of COVID and things that have been happening in the business, it may take a little bit longer to pay that off than what you were initially anticipating. So what I'd like to check in on that is I'm going to go into what we call the beneficiary report. And Joe, what this does is if you have a look here, it shows you all of your assets, all of your liabilities, as well as life insurance that you have in place at the moment. And then it shows a column for who will be receiving that should something happen to you. So we can see what's going to Katie, what's going to your daughter Jane, or what's going to your son Jason. So if we have a look here, it was very important to you for your assets should something happen to you that they go to Katie, because we know that's what she needs to sustain, the lifestyle for her and for the two kids. You also mentioned that this life cover would go, you wanted that to go to Katie and the other one to be split between her two children, your two children, Jane and Jason, equally. What I want to highlight today is this liability over here, this 3 million, because as it stands today, because this loan is owed to the business, should something happen to you, this would need to be settled. And that would mean that either one of these assets, which I know you want to go to Katie, or this life cover would need to be used to settle this loan. Now, there are different options and we can work through them. And Joe says, great, I'd like to understand what the options are. Well, we could pay it off. We could reassign some of the life cover to cover that and relook at the scenario, the impacts of that. Or, we could look at taking out more cover temporarily while you're paying it off to ensure that that's covered. Okay, great. Let me know what the options are and we'll take it from there. Now, as an aside, the reason I chose this example is it's something that I see coming up quite a bit in the last year with...
Oh, okay.
That I see coming up in the last year with clients, with planners dealing with clients. And, we have a lot of clients that are business owners, and it can change really quickly in a year what sits inside that business. So just something to be aware of is what loans they have with the business, either loans where they owe the business funds or the business owes them funds, and the impact that could have on a plan. So it's really important to not only look at the value of a business for an individual like we see here, but to actually unpack what sits inside the business and what impact could that have potentially on the client's plan that we've put in place. So this is one of the things we can do proactively, is just have a look at one section in the plan and see, are there risks that have come out of this? Are there changes that maybe have an impact on the plans that we've put in place? The last one I just want to highlight is looking at Katie here, and I want to talk through an example of, coaching and educating when there hasn't been changes. So, Katie, previously we spoke about these and that it was left from your late father, and we moved them into your name. But at the time, we didn't really talk about what the purpose of that was. And at this point, I can start to talk to Katie about trying to understand what is the legacy that her father wanted to leave by leaving those, trusts to her, and what's the legacy she would like to leave. And maybe Katie doesn't know the answer, offhand. We could say, think about it, think about what the intention is of this, and then we'll, talk more about it later. Or maybe Katie does know, and she says, my father wanted to leave that to me to give me a head start in life. But obviously it's later on in life now, and I don't really need that head start potentially now. So I want to pass this on to my kids. And then we can go, great, okay, let's unpack that. What would a head start for Jane and Jason be? What would that need? What would success look like when you can say, okay, that those funds really achieved the legacy my father wanted and the legacy I want to leave with these funds. And then we can look at structuring it and putting a strategy in place to achieve that. So it's again about looking at the current picture, seeing where the client is and focusing on just one thing, one or two things to say, let's just drill a little bit deeper into this and see if there's a way we can move the client forward. Now, today I've just gone through, a few examples. You, I'm sure, have loads of different examples that you do, and these are not new concepts that you're using. But the message I want to share is that there's value in every single one of these quadrants that planners are adding, regardless of where the client fits in. And a client will never fit into just one quadrant. Over your relationship with them, they will fall into these different quadrants over that period. The key thing is, how do we take that value and bring it into the client engagement? How do we do it in a way that the client can see it, understand it, and engage with that? So thank you very much. I'm going to just hand back to Gary to close for the day.
Thanks, Kirst. Okay, we're going to wrap up here with a bit of quick admin. So I'm going to give you the link. The link I'm putting into the message box. So if you click on that link, you'll pop up with a quick assessment. Still people coming in. So it's a really quick assessment, and from the assessment we'll send you a CPD certificate, and I will quickly just wrap up with some closing thoughts, and we can bid you a farewell. Kirsty, can you see my screen?
It's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm taking us all the way back to the beginning to say, what does it mean to put an ethical lens onto the reviews that we are doing with clients, and to remind us that the code talks primarily about these three things. So we've got to show up honestly, and that has all the connotations of transparency and disclosure and all of that type of stuff. We've got to understand the client's situation, and I think that has been the key, the crux of this engagement, to say, what does that mean? What does it mean to understand the client's situation? So it means we've got to look at the client and his life, and the product and the portfolio and that life, and then equally we need to make a plan to take them forward. And again, what does it mean to make a plan? We need to take the client forward, and we need to take that product or that portfolio forward. So wrapping it up in two versions of revision planning and proactive planning, and we hope that this can be a good phrase to help you to be intentional about the value that you're already showing to your clients, but really being intentional to bring it into your relationship. So to take that stuff that's happening in the back office and bring it into the forefront to show your clients the value that you're adding progressively over time. And it is with that I would like to say thank you for your time. We really appreciate you being on board. Mariette is saying it asks to sign in. Mariette, is that the...
I checked the form on my side. It seems to be working. If you click on the link, it should open up a Google.
It should open straight in.
Yeah,
Mariette?
when I open the link, sorry Gary, when I open the link, it says a secure, something about a secure something, and then it let me just see what it says here. Yeah, sign in. To continue to fill out this form, you must be signed in. Your identity will remain anonymous. Report abuse. Sign in.
Okay, let me have a look at the... I'll double check here.
Just check the controls on there.
Yeah, I'm having exactly the same problem.
Okay.
Okay, let's see if we can...
I think let's just email it if we don't...
Okay, we'll fix that and email it to you.
Okay, that would sort my technology. If this
It's
is
probably on our side, so we'll fix that and email it to you.
So other people are saying it worked for them.
So we'll have to just check.
You need to log into Google, into your Google account.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm also struggling.
Okay, no
same
problem.
issue,
We'll
yeah.
email it to everyone, and then if you could fill it in from there, if you have already, then obviously you don't need to do that again, and then we'll send your certificates.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Thanks,
Kirsty,
guys.
I can't even see a link. So if you can do that, that would be great. Thank you.
So we'll do.
Maybe Gary can just repaste it quickly. Was it appeared when you pasted it?
Yeah. Okay,
But
that's
I can't see it
I
now.
think it'll be easier just to email it as well. Then everybody has it.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Kirsty, when will you send it out to us?
We'll do that now.
We'll do that
All
right
right.
now, yeah.
Cheers. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, cheers. I need to stop this recording,
Yeah, perfect. And then I think we can.
which it won't allow me to do, but anyway, that's, there we go. Perfect.
Harry, I think some people maybe don't have a Google account.
It
Potentially.
shouldn't make a difference.
Doesn't.
Yeah.
We'll have to just check